What's up, y'all? Thanks so much for clicking on the video. My name is Leah, and let's recap and review Married to Medicine. This is season 11. I don't know what episode, but part 3 and the final installment of this season. Honestly, y'all, they could have kept this 3-part reunion. It could have just been 2 parts, and we could have been done. We could have been done last week. I don't know this obsession Bravo has with giving us 3-part reunions, but sometimes a 2-parter is just fine. It's fine, okay? But let's get into the video. So, y'all know sometimes before we get into it, we get a little spicy, just a little bit. And I just have a few things to talk to y'all about before we get into the review. So, first up, let's talk about Dr. Heavenly, okay? Now, I'm going to say all of this information is alleged. I haven't seen the court paperwork. I ain't seen the police reports. But allegedly, Dr. Heavenly and Dr. Damon's oldest son got caught up with the police back in 2023. They're saying that he allegedly got arrested for an altercation that took place on his school campus with one of, I guess, the school police officers. Now, I don't care about this story, so I haven't done my due diligence to dig and get more information. But check out James Caldwell's video. I linked it in the description box below. He actually talked to Dr. Heavenly about it, and they also talked about the reunion, as well as shouts out to Really Be TV. She actually looked at the blogger's page who exposed this story, and she has the interview, or not even interview. Dr. Heavenly and Carlos King were on his page talking about it. So check those 2 videos out, because if you really want to know the information in the tea, they got it. So continuing on with Dr. Heavenly, the Bravo Shade Room caught one of her clips from her YouTube channel, and I'm going to share it with you guys. It says this: Dr. Heavenly reveals that Dr. Scott asked Quad for advice after a blogger threatened to release information about him allegedly being seen at a hotel with another woman. So let me play that clip for you guys.
I really don't. I know he ain't got no kids, but I'm saying I really don't think he cheat. I really don't. Contessa Gaslight you in place. But I'm surprised they didn't play the part about Scott. I guess because Scott been so silent, they really probably want them to come back. But now Scott called Quad about some woman he was at a hotel with. Quad admitted it. She said he called me up and said, "How do I keep this out of the blogs?" Quad told him, "Listen, get your wife. The main thing you want to do is get your wife." And that's how we got in the conversation of she saying, "I'm being miserable." Because my answer wouldn't have been your titties after she said I'm miserable. My answer would have been, you must be miserable because you done filed for divorce 3, 4, 6 times. You done filed for divorce at least 3 times that we know of. Allegedly. One time you lied on camera and did not file. You filed a year later when we wasn't even around. And then you canceled the divorce proceedings right before we started filming. A few months before we started filming. Per Simone. These are Simone's words. She looked it up. She said she got the ask her. I don't think she'd lie about it. I don't think that. I really don't. So I presented that, and Contessa was like, what? And Quad said, yes, that did happen. He called me, and I told, and it looked like Contessa already knew, but Contessa was already pissed with Quad. That's why when he went backstage, looked like that she was happy that Simone was saying these things to Quad because all that had already transpired. Quad backed it up. She was like, yes, he called me. It ain't no lie. Why was Scott called Quad? This was years ago, though. This was maybe before the last season she was on. But he called her and said, you know what? These people saying they got some receipts on me that I was at a hotel room with this woman. How do I keep that from going to the vlogs? Quad said, I don't know this particular vlogger, but go get your wife, explain to her what it is. So you get her on your team before any of this come to pass. Now, it never did come out. It never did. I never saw it. But Scott did call her with that. So that's what it was. So I presented that.
So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when I was watching James Caldwell's video that he did with Heavenly, and the link to that again is in the description box below. It's labeled Spill It Boy because that's the name of his channel. What's her name? Heavenly shared that Contessa and Quad having that exchange about Scott happened right before they got off the stage. And she was surprised that they didn't show it. And I was like, well, they probably didn't show it because they didn't really add context to what was happening throughout the season, because we didn't see Quad and Contessa get into it. We just saw you and Contessa get into it. But I only bring this to y'all because it's interesting, because a lot of people were making comments about how Contessa seemed to be on Simone's side when Quad and her were going back and forth in the back room. Some people said it seemed like Contessa had an attitude with Quad as well. So if Heavenly is telling the truth, which I think she is, then that makes sense why Contessa was given that energy. Because a lot of people on Twitter were talking about like Contessa's energy being off in that segment. She also gave more context as to why she brought up Contessa's botched titties, because she was like, Contessa kept calling me Rasputia, the character off of that Eddie Murphy movie. And she was like, if you can talk about my body, I can talk about yours. And if that is true, then yeah, that's fair game. If you gonna call me an unfavorable like character that has an enormously large body who a lot of people associate with being ugly, then I'm gonna talk about your titties. Fair is fair in my book. So let's get into some tweets. So first up is Toya. So Toya responded to somebody by the name of Into My Reality, and they said this: I'm so disappointed in Toya Bush Harris this season. I'd grown to enjoy her on the show, but the way she switched up and aligned herself with Quad, the person that accused her of having an affair, called her husband a B, and said you robbed someone, is so disgusting. So then Toya quote tweeted this person by saying, I didn't. I was talked about and blocked by Tanisha. I was done trying to be her friend. And I think that's valid. Like, why would I defend somebody who talked negatively about me and then blocked me? And I don't even think she aligned herself with Quad. I think the way Toya shows up is how she really shows up. The way Toya feels about somebody is how she genuinely feels. I don't think anybody can really change Toya's opinion about people. Like, she bases her opinion off of how she experiences the person. So moving on, a person by the name of Carmen K said, at Toya, I have loved you all seasons, but this season, girl, you get a hashtag married to medicine. I think they meant to say you did that hashtag married to medicine. Thank you for keeping it real. And so Toya quote tweeted this person by saying, thank you, boo, hashtag M2M. And then the last tweet from Toya is from somebody by the name of Chai O'Pear, says, when are you guys going to talk about at Dr. Heavenly's son's police case, at Dr. Simone, at Dr. Contessa, at Dr. Toya? Or is the next storyline going to be T and Quad saga? And Toya quote tweeted this by saying, please don't make up things on children. Come on, y'all. So my thing about it is, I don't think anybody is going to touch the son situation because they have children, and that's one thing we can give Married to Medicine. They only attack the adults, and even though their kids are technically adults because they're in their 20s, they're still somebody's kids, and nobody wants their children to be attacked. So I don't think no one's going to bring that information up. They're not. So our next couple of tweets are coming from Heavenly. She quote tweeted, or no, she reposted somebody saying this: Sweet Tea and King are both collateral damage caught in the crossfire. Hashtag married to med. Do y'all think so? Next, another tweet came from a certain person by the name of The Baddest that said, see, my problem with Simone is that she tries to speak for the group instead of herself, then turned around and became friends with someone because of a mutual dislike for a person. At your big age is beyond me. Get the F on. Hashtag married to medicine. And Heavenly quote tweeted that person by saying, agreed. I slightly agree with this, but I also feel like Simone talks for the group is because they've had conversations about this. They all do it. Okay. So moving on, another person by the name of Lauren J said this: I don't need to know your business to be your friend. I think that's Simone's issue. And then Heavenly quote tweeted this person by saying, well said. Then we're not friends then. That's not a friendship. We're just co-workers or we're associates, because in order to be classified as friends, that means y'all have a deeper understanding of each other and y'all do share personal information. Y'all do know each other's business to a certain extent. So the next one is a person saying, Damon clearly checks Heavenly. Y'all just want to see him treat her like Dr. Mouse treats Lipton. Hashtag married to med. Heavenly quote tweeted this person saying, and he'd never do that. I mean, I get what people, like I keep telling y'all, Heavenly gets checked. Y'all just want to see people tear her down in the way that y'all believe she tears other people down. And Heavenly's never going to let that happen. And I don't think Damon would ever do that to Heavenly. So the last tweet from Heavenly, which was a repost, somebody by the name of Jack said this: I want to see Dr. Mimi back next season. She didn't get a fair crack. She came in with too much was going on. Hashtag married to med. And I do hope Dr. Mimi comes back. I like the way that she meshed with the group, and it seemed like Andy also enjoyed her as well. So the last thing we're going to talk about is Miss Quad, Miss Quad, Miss Quad. So Quad was responding to somebody in the comment section, I guess on Bravo Shade Room, where this person named Chrissy underscore love 24 said, I'm confused. Simone says she was good with you and she's been posting messy stuff with Country Girl for the last few weeks. She hasn't been posting anything messy for the last few weeks. They just keep reposting clips from that one video that Sweet Tea and Simone did on Sweet Tea's channel. It continues on by saying, at Christy underscore love, this is Quad responding to this lady saying, Simone has to deal with her own issues that she's holding between us. Trust me, it changes every 3 minutes and I'm exhausted. Just like at Nene Leak said, if we're friends and you liked me, but you don't like something I did, you can talk to me about it. You don't go with the enemy. And I'll play the clip for you guys that she's referring to.
And they do something wrong or something you don't like, I don't think you align yourself with the enemy. I think that you stick with your friend and you say, look, we were friends. I liked you. You did this and I did not like that. But at the end of the day, you're not going to align yourself with the enemy.
So here's my thing. Are they friends? Were they ever friends? Because at this point, it's starting to feel like Quad does not view these women as friends. She views them as her co-workers. So if that's what it is, then Simone doesn't owe you nothing. Because you're not my friend, you're my co-worker. You're my associate. And I feel like from Simone's point of view, I guess she thought they were friends, but Quad doesn't treat them like friends. That's where I feel like there needs to be clarity. Y'all need to sit down and really talk about, like, are we friends or not? Because again, if we're not friends, I don't owe you nothing. I don't owe you a certain amount of loyalty. If you're just my coworker, that is it. That is all. We collecting a check and I click up with whoever I want to click up with. But I don't know. But let's get into this review. I said, y'all, in the intro, this definitely could have been a two-part reunion. They could have added 30 minutes to part two, but I feel like the argument between Quad and Simone is what pushed it to a part three. Because even when the husbands got on stage, it definitely felt like we were just rehashing things that happened in part one and part two. But that's just me. So let's talk about it. So the episode opens up. We see the men on stage. They're talking about what happened between Greg and Quad at the Vibe Check game in Key West. It's basically a rehashment of what happened the last like 7 or 6 minutes of part two. Curtis defends Quad because Gregory was like, Quad was just doing too much. And Curtis is just kind of like, well, you did the same last season. You talked about your marriage, how happy you were to get with Tanisha and all of that stuff. And I don't think it's wrong for Quad to do the same. And I agree with Curtis. Like, if you could do it, then she should be able to do it as well. So we then see the women in the back, and Quad is like, thank you, like, agreeing with Curtis, basically like point blank period. That's just all it is. So then Simone and Quad get into it because Simone ends up saying, well, it's different because you were on TV watching while Tanisha y'all was doing this all in front of Greg and Tanisha's face. And Quad was just like, the real issue is that y'all invited them to this show, which I don't think is very true. I think production wanted them to be on this show, because just because they invited them to this show doesn't mean they would get the green light to be on the show and film. Production wanted them to be a part of the show because they wanted to see the reaction between you and Greg, and Sweet Tea. And I feel like Quad's anger is misplaced. I honestly feel like she wants to be mad at production, but production signs them checks. And I do think she's angry at the ladies, but I think her anger is more so because the ladies welcome them with open arms. Whereas it seems like they might have gotten a choice if they wanted to film with Greg or Sweet Tea. Whereas with Phaedra, it feels like they just, like, production was like, we getting Phaedra, we're putting Phaedra on this show, and it is what it is. I don't know, because I feel like, yeah, you can be mad at them, but ultimately production is the one that said it was okay for them to film. But that's just my take on it. So Quad is getting fed up with Simone, so she just was like, girl, shut the F up. So then Simone was like, no, girl, you shut the F up. And then Quad is like, I said it first. I laughed at that because I said, that's funny. So then Quad makes her way to the sofa where Simone is sitting. So then Simone jumps up and they start to argue back and forth. And security comes in and pulls Simone kind of back away from Quad. You had Contessa get in between them, and Simone ends up saying, "You got what karma gave." Basically, like, you got what you deserve. So then, Quad is like, "Karma, Simone." Like, what karma, Simone? And a lot of people were trying to say that Simone was saying she was talking about the little girl dying at Quad's house. I don't know. That is not what she was talking about. She was genuinely talking about them kicking her out the group. Like, she was like, "Girl," especially because when she followed it up with Simone followed up saying, "You always turn your back on people, so we turned our back on you." It was definitely pertaining to, like, "Girl, we kicked you out the group because you weren't around, so it is what it is. That's the karma that you got." I don't think she was remotely talking about that little girl that unfortunately passed away at Quad's house. So then Quad is like, "Girl, turn my back on people. I helped you look for your dad." So then, unfortunately, Simone's dad went missing during 2016, and then they found out that he was dead somewhere. So Simone gets mad, and she was like, "Don't mention my daddy." So then everybody is just like, whoa. Like, I don't think anybody was prepared for it to get that heated, because you have Heavenly and Toya sitting on the same couch, arms spread out, like, whoa, 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 whoa. Everybody pause for a minute. Like, let's take it back. Let's take it back for a minute. Like, Heavenly is touching Simone, like, Simone. And so then you see Jackie jump up, and she's like, "Simone, come on." So then security's pulling Simone out of the room. Jackie's also trying to pull her back. You got Contessa, like, bear hugging behind Quad, holding her, and they just going off on each other. And Simone ends up, before she gets out the room, she was like, "You are never there when there's never a camera." I said, ooh. And you could tell that both of them were hurt, because Simone is crying, Quad is crying. I think it's a mixture of alcohol. Because I don't think it would have got that heated. I do think they would have had an exchange of words, but I don't think they would have gotten that mad at each other, because I was like, they both started crying, and I was like, "Oh, y'all still somewhat care about each other." Like, to a certain extent, there is still, like, some type of, like, I care about this person. I'm mad at this person. Because to me, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference, where you don't have any feelings for that person, you don't really care about them, and, like, you don't really have emotions for them, but they still have emotions for each other. That's why I can never get with the whole, like, Simone hates Quad, because I feel like if you hate somebody, and there's somebody I do not like, I don't care about them no more. Like, whatever happens to them. But, like, when people hate people, it gets, like, because I'm thinking about stan culture, where it's a lot of fans that are like, "Oh, I hate this certain artist," but yet y'all follow that artist's every move. To a certain extent, you care about them. And the fact that both Quad and Simone were getting emotional tells me that that's not hate, that's genuine hurt from both of them. If I just need them to both be honest about their feelings, because to me, I feel like Simone and Quad have similar personalities in the fact that they hold grudges. Like, people can apologize to them, they can apologize, but, like, they still are mad and angry at the person. So you see Jackie and Simone go to this room to have a conversation. Sweet Tea tries to get in on the conversation, but Jackie's like, "Girl, go away. Go away. I need you to give us a minute. Go away." And some people were upset by that, but I wasn't. Like, let's be honest. Sweet Tea has only been around this group for 2 years. Jackie and Simone have been friends for almost, like, I think 30 years, so 3 decades. So I would have told her to get out too. Like, "Girl, I'm talking to my friend, my real friend. Go away." Go away. So Jackie is telling Simone, "Calm down. Like, take a moment, calm down." And Simone was like, "Jackie, she was not there. She was never there when there's no camera." She was like, "I didn't get no text message, no call, no nothing. She never came and checked on me. Like, I'm sick of it always being like, what we did, what we did." Like, she does the same thing. She does the same thing. So Jackie's just like, breathe, girl, calm down." And Simone's like, "I'm trying to calm down," as she's, like, wiping her tears away. In the other room, you have the ladies trying to talk Quad down, because Quad is getting emotional too. And she's saying, like, that's dirty of her to do something like that. And Toya's like, "It's not dirty, girl. She telling you what it is. You weren't around, so she befriended them. She felt like you left her. So basically, she felt abandoned by you, so she moved on." So then you have Mimi and Mimi telling Quad, basically, "Girl, like, y'all are both healing. You have hurt feelings, she has hurt feelings, and once y'all are not emotional, maybe you'll be able to sit with your feelings and really sift through the situation. So you see them kind of calm everything down, and you see Quad and Toya have a conversation where Quad is like, I didn't want to argue with her. I did not want to argue with Simone. Like, I didn't want it to be all of that. And Toya's like, well, it's out now. Maybe y'all can move forward. You know what I mean? After the ladies done had what they had, we get back to the stage and they're still talking about the vibe check game. Gregory ends up saying the reason why he felt some type of way about that situation is because he felt like Quad was trashing his marriage. I don't think she was. She was definitely clowning. She was definitely clowning, but I don't think she was dogging his marriage out until it got to the point where they were arguing and Quad was like, my man would never talk to me like that. You know, that is where I feel like it came to like talking crap about the man. But before then, I don't think it was that. I really don't. I just think Gregory still has resentment built up against Quad, and Quad has the same resentment. Well, not the same, but they both have ill feelings towards each other, basically. So nothing Quad were to say or what Gregory said about her relationship was ever going to be perceived well on both ends, in my opinion. So we move on. They talk about the fight that happened on the sandbar. Basically, we find out that they were only on the sandbar for 22 minutes and then all hell broke loose. Like Steven, basically, when he made that comment saying like, you know, I ain't never seen nothing crazy like that, because Andy ends up asking him about it. He was like, well, yeah, because it was like 4 fights happening all at once. So they show us a montage of when Shaq and Apollo got into it, when Shireen Apollo versus Phaedra, when Sweet Tea and Heavenly got into it, and then when Gregory and King got into it. All of that took place in a span of 22 minutes. That's a lot. That's so much. Like I said, y'all wasn't even on there for an hour, and y'all was carrying on like that. That's crazy. That is crazy. So the conversation continues, and basically one of the questions was like, well, Greg, why did you feel the need to tell King that you told Quad she got a big effing mouth? And Greg ends up saying I was inebriated, basically. He said, y'all was drunk. And mind you, I slightly believe that. I do believe that he was intoxicated because they were drinking on that boat to the place, to the sandbar, and even on the sandbar. But I also do feel like Greg was trying to posture in front of the group, especially around the men. Like him getting up, that will always be perceived to me as like, oh, you was trying to put your dick on the table. Like, because if we're not in a good place and you get up from your seat and walk towards me, I don't know what you about to do. And I feel like you were trying to do that to sun me. And I feel like that's why King was just like, yeah, I'm gonna start saying something back to you because you're trying to play in my face pretty much. So they then move on from that and they talk about the charges that Greg tried to press. King said he went down to the police station and they laughed because they were like, no physical contact was made, so there's no charges that can be pressed. So then Andy was like, okay, so there's no charges. And King was like, no. And then Greg tries to say, I stopped pressing charges. And King was like, how do you press charges when no physical contact has been made, bro? And he's like, well, like Greg didn't have no response because I was like, yeah, that's kind of stupid. Like I told y'all before, and I'll stand on this. Had King put hands on Gregory, I probably still would be on King's side, but I would understand Gregory moving to go to the police to talk about the situation and press charges because physical contact was made. But the fact that physical contact wasn't made, you only did that because you didn't want that man filming, and that to me was a weak move. Before they even got into the whole sandbar of it all, they were talking about that situation that happened between Gregory and Sweet Tea, where he ended up saying that, you know, had Shaq not been there, Gregory and King would have fought to the death. Everyone pretty much laughs in his face, and they were like, who would have won? And Gregory ends up saying, like, you know, clearly King because he's half my age and twice my size. And they were all like, oh, at least you know. Like, that was the energy. Well, at least you know you would have got beat up. And he ends up saying, like, you know, but I think maybe we could have took him if Letitia jumped in. They also talk about the way that he spoke to Letitia, where he was just like, you know, you can be so naive sometimes. Then when they were upstairs and she was telling him to be quiet and don't talk to me like that, these are my feelings. And he was like, well, don't say stupid things. And Andy was like, don't you think you owe her an apology? And he was like, yeah, I regret talking to my wife that way. Like, she is owed an apology. So I'm like, it's been almost like 6 or 7 months and you have still not apologized. Like, when the episode aired, you definitely should have apologized. That's why you got on Sweet Tea's channel trying to like talk about the way that you are kind of wrong for saying what you said because you knew you looked bad. You looked horrible, sir. Like, it was borderline abusive. Like, people were getting worried, like, really, I hope he not throwing things at you and stuff like that. So I'm just like, the fact that you haven't apologized is crazy work. Crazy. So getting back to the whole pressing charges situation, King basically says, I came up to you because I knew, like, I feel like you were just surprised that I stood on business with you and I wasn't going to allow you to punk me. Then Gregory ends up saying, like, no, you was trying to bully me. You the one that pulled me aside. Now, I will give Gregory that it was not the time or the place for King to pull him aside to have a conversation. Y'all were only on the sandbar for 22 minutes and all that chaos and confusion was happening. There was no need for y'all to have a conversation. But what I will say is you were trying to play in that man's face when you walked up on him. Like, you were. And so he walked up on you the same way, and it turned into something. And you were the one that got aggressive first because y'all were having a civil conversation. Y'all were this close to each other. And then when Shaq and Cecil came over there, next thing you know, it's da-da-da-da-da-da. I knew that's how you was because I know how your girl is. You got amped. And that's when he got amped. So Andy ends up asking, like, do you think you guys could ever be cool or be friends or like have some type of relationship? And Greg ends up saying, I don't think so because he has this perception of me already. And King was like, no, I came into this being very rational and being like, you know what? They had a past. That's their past. I'm going to allow myself to get to know you. Like, you're the one who is doing all of this. So then Greg ends up saying, like, I don't know if I could be cool with somebody who's trying to destroy my character. So then Curtis jumps in and he's like, well, you apologized to him. And the only other thing was you needed to apologize to King. So I don't know why y'all can't be cool. So they show the flashbacks where he did apologize. And he was just like, you right, I did apologize because I felt like it needed to be said to him, but I don't know why I need to apologize to her if she's not going to apologize to me. And that's when King was like, I don't think she disrespected you. And he was like, well, she did disrespect me. So then Eugene jumps in and he's just like, we're men. And sometimes we just have to take the high road with these things. And he was just like, do you think you should have said what you said, saying that she had a big effing mouth? And so Gregory was like, I think I think it needed to be said. I do think it needs to be said. So then everybody's like, really, man? Really? Really? And see, this is where Gregory loses me, where he's surprised why the men didn't take his side is because they're all operating off of a different code than you, and you not trying to get hip to the code. So I don't understand why you didn't understand why they wouldn't have just like sided with you. You know what I'm saying? So then Curtis is like, come on, man, like for real. And so then that's when King is like, yo, he crazy. He is crazy. So Eugene ends up saying, well, man, I think you were just uncomfortable. You were uncomfortable. Like, she had her new man here. He popping his chest. And that's a hard thing to do. I don't think nobody else would want to be on a trip with their boyfriend or with their significant others, like ex and all of that stuff. Like, I don't think anyone would want that. So, like, maybe you was just uncomfortable and it was just a hard time. And then Greg was like, no, it wasn't a hard time. So then Cecil was just, man, just accept what he's saying. He's saying what he's saying, so just accept it so we can move on. So then they wrap the men's segment and get prepared for the men and the women to be on stage. The men go backstage and they're letting them know, like, girl, the girls got into it. Toya ends up saying Simone, Quad, and Heavenly got in, like, Simone and Quad got into it. Heavenly cussed out Tanisha. It's just a whole bunch. Then we see Simone telling, what's her name, Cecil, that, yeah, I got into it with Quad. And then Jackie was like, girl, I had to pull her back. I had to bring her back down to earth because she was out there in the atmosphere. And then Cecil was like, y'all can't never get it together. Y'all always doing the most. Y'all still can't get it together. Cecil and Toya are gossiping about what happened backstage, and Toya's like, your wife? Okay. And Cecil said, we've been doing this for 11 years and you ladies just can't get right. You just can't get right. So then they start the reunion as the couples get situated, and Andy is like, so I heard it went down backstage. What happened? Like, what happened? And so Quad ends up saying, like, Simone, you said I got my karma. What did you mean by that? Maybe I misunderstood. Simone basically was like, I don't think you were owed an apology for Napa. And I'm kind of getting tired of you constantly saying that we ushered them into this group and we've done all these things that were wrong to you. When it's like, girl, you don't feel comfortable sharing your life with us. You don't share anything with us. So what's wrong with us moving on? And I think a lot of people on the cast are like, yeah, what is wrong with us moving on if you don't want to have us be a part of your life? You know what I'm saying? And so Quad is like, yes, you did usher them in. And Simone is like, no, we didn't. Gregory and Cecil were still hanging out, going to play golf and everything. Their friendship never stopped. So it's not like we just started communicating with them to like bring them on this show. And then Quad is like, well, you just said to me back there, girl, that you brought them on this show to get at me. So how am I supposed to think? Which is valid, Quad. So here, I feel like they both have valid arguments. Quad can feel how she feel because, girl, you just yelled at her saying you wasn't around, so we brought on who we were around. So it does feel like you were trying to get back at her. But Simone has a point where it's like, girl, you're not around, so what is wrong with us ushering in or moving on with our lives when you don't want to be a part of ours and you don't feel comfortable sharing things with us, you know? So then Quad ends up saying, I don't know where me and Simone went wrong, but honestly, I can say that I'm holding on to things that happened last season, and they bring up what happened at the reunion. And she was just like, I have to let that go. She said, also, I was wrong for what I said back there, and I'm sorry that I said what I said. So Simone doesn't say anything. She just, and Quad's like, you have anything to say? And Simone's like, no, I'm done. And the Quad is like, okay. So then Andy was like, I think you meant to say I accept. And Simone says, I accept. So when she says I'm done, I took it as like done with the conversation. But then I was like, it could also be taken as like I'm done with this relationship. And here's the thing. I feel like two things can be true. Do I think Gregory and Sweet Tea should have been back on this show? No, because it's like they ain't been around and like they don't give reality TV. They just don't. But I also understand Simone's point of view where she's like, girl, my husband and him have been friends like since y'all got a divorce. So it's not like we just plucked them, you know, from off the side of the road and just started hanging out with them. So like, but then I understand Quad being like, well, you just yelled at me and said you ushered them in based off of like having ill feelings towards me. So how am I supposed to feel? But I do feel, so this is the thing. I know a lot of people don't like Simone. I tell y'all Simone my girl, but I know a lot of people don't like Simone. But I do understand how people can feel a way about Simone. You know, how she is coming off angry, bitter, and jealous. When it's like, girl, the floor was given to you to expound upon why you are angry with her, why are you upset with her, and you didn't say anything. Even though I think what she said to Jackie was valid, like, girl, you're never around, and you always saying what we did to you, but you never have put effort into this relationship. And I think really what it boils down to is Simone feels abandoned by Quad, and maybe she thought their relationship was more than what it was, and the fact that Quad doesn't share things with them bothers her because she probably really wants to be back friends with Quad, because I do think people forget how close they were during that season when Simone was looking for her father. Like, they were really close that season. So I just feel like Simone is angry, and it's hard to get over a friendship breakup. I think at right now she's at that point of being angry at the person, and instead of like reevaluating her feelings, and it's coming off bitter, it's coming off jealous, it's coming off like hatred. But then on the other hand, I look at Quad and I'm like, you are constantly expecting these women to respect you a certain way and have loyalty to you, but you don't treat them as friends. When you classify somebody as a friend, there is a type of respect and loyalty. If you are my coworker, I give you the bare minimum. I don't give you that much information about me. I am kind to you to a certain extent, which I think that's a level of respect, but I don't go the extra mile for you. And I think that's where the other women are like, we don't owe you nothing because you don't see us as friends. And that's where I feel like I get annoyed with people who are like team Quad, or like, you know, like they ride so hard for her, because I'm like, if y'all take a step back, y'all would be looking at Quad kind of crazy. Like, girl, you expecting these women to treat you a certain way, but you're not friends with them. Because I do, like I said, I do think it is kind of not kind of, it is messed up they brought Gregory around, knowing that Quad and Gregory did not have the best relationship, knowing that it was toxic. Like, they created an uncomfortable environment for both people, so they are wrong on that part. But I also feel like Quad is also always expecting this type of energy from these women, but you don't reciprocate it, because in order to get friendship privileges and behavior, you got to be a friend. And I don't feel like she is. And I feel like because people don't really like the other women and they love them some Quad, they never really see that part about her, where I'm just like, Quad is cool. Like I've been saying in my reviews, the ladies have done Quad wrong at times, but I'm also like, Quad is, put her foot in her mouth and done them women wrong at times. It's not just some one-sided beef, So then Heavenly chimes in and she's just like, Contessa, I just want to say I'm sorry. Like, I felt horrible watching the two of them fight. She was like, I didn't know if I needed to go to Simone or if I needed to go to Quad. Like, it just was horrible. And I will say, you could tell that Heavenly didn't know what to do, so she did nothing. Like, she just stayed in her seat, because when they were consoling Quad in that back room, it was just Mimi and Toya. Heavenly didn't move. Just like when Jackie took, what's her name, Simone, to that other room, Heavenly didn't follow. I think she was so like, I don't know what to do, that she just didn't do nothing. So then Contessa was like, I would be cool with us like moving on. And I feel like at this point, Quad and Simone, we got to move on. Like, we can't argue about this next season if they bring everybody back. Heavenly and what's her name, and Contessa, y'all can't argue about this no more. We got to move on. We got to move on. So they start talking about King, and Quad is singing that man's praises. She's like, ain't my man fine, blah blah blah. They talk about him buying her a Rolls Royce, and a commenter is like, when you gonna give her a ring? And he said it's coming soon. All the time while King and Quad are talking, you can tell that Gregory and Letitia are uncomfortable. Gregory got that 100-yard stare, and Letitia keeps like rolling her eyes, and I'm like, well, you put yourself in this predicament. Nobody told y'all to get back on this show or come on this show, because I'm like, with her up here, she has to talk about her man just like you talked about yours. Talk about the couples trip. They give a montage of everything. They talk about King and Quad having sex 15 times a week, and she was like, we just did it this morning, and everyone's just like, and see, Quad, that's why people think it's fake, because you are too gleeful about this. But I also feel like we've never seen Quad in a relationship, so this might just be how she acts when she gets into a relationship with a guy. Because I've known women who, like, you wouldn't think they would be all this lovey-dovey and singing their man's praises, but the moment they get into a relationship and let him be a good guy, oh, my man is the type of energy my friends give, and it's hilarious to me. So the conversation continues, where Quad is just like, we do that because he makes me feel special. He makes me feel appreciated. And Letitia, like I said, is making faces. And I'm like, girl, when they talk about Quad, you should have no reaction, because you should know the camera is going to be on you. Same way with Quad. When Letitia and them talk, I would blank stare. I wouldn't be making no faces. So they then start talking about the vibe check game, and the viewer's question is like, Quad, you was inebriated? Like, were you only, doing all of that because you were drunk? And Quad was like, no, I was talking highly about my man, and I feel like I can do that just like they're allowed to do that. And Gregory chimes in and he's like, yeah, I am too. So then Andy ends up saying, do you think, you, Quad, and Gregory, that T and King just gets caught up in the crosshairs of y'all's relationship just because it seems like y'all have unresolved issues? And Quad ends up saying, well, no. And I'm like, yeah, Quad. Like that person said in the spicy corner, T and King are low-key like collateral damage. Like, people don't like Sweet T because of Gregory, and people don't like King because of Quad. Now, there are people like me that don't like people off of just, the way they show up, because she, like I told you, she give goofy goober. But I do see a lot of people not liking her because of her attachment to Gregory and being in an adversarial role towards Quad. And I've seen the same thing with King. People don't like King because of him dating Quad and them liking Gregory. So they are kind of getting backlash for partnering with these people. But also, like, everyone is a consenting adult and signed up to be in this mess. So it's like, you can feel bad for them, but also, like, you ain't have to do this. They keep talking, and Andy ends up asking Greg, is there anything you think you can apologize for to Quad? He ends up apologizing for his behavior at the vibe check game. He basically says that's not how he normally acts, which I was like, I don't know about that, sir. But he said there were some outside things happening, and he was very emotional, and that's why he gave that response. So I guess this is what, because Sweet Tea said the reason why Gregory was on one in Key West is because he got attacked by a patient, and that's why he was so heightened. I said, girl, I don't know about that. I feel like that's a lie, but okay. So he was like, because that's not my typical response, I apologize to you for that, Quad. So Quad accepts the apology, and then Andy ends up being like, is there anything that you can apologize for, Quad? And Quad basically says, before she talks, Toya is like, well, I'm a little uncomfortable. Everyone laughs because they feel like that's what got the party started at the vibe check game. But Quad basically says, I just want to make the record known that if I'm bigging up my man, I'm not trying to down Greg. Like, that's not what it is, But I also am not responsible for another person's feelings, especially the feelings of my ex-husband. And I think that's valid. Like, y'all didn't care about her feelings last season, so why should she care about his feelings this season? And even if she was, bigging up her man to take a shot at Greg, so what? They not together no more. And he signed up for this. You signed up to be around your ex-wife. You willingly did that. So whatever comes with that, you have to deal with that. And Sweet Tea as well, because you signed up for it too. So we move on, and Sweet Tea ends up saying under her breath, she was like, I just would like for you not to mention my husband. And Quad was like, I didn't mention your husband. And Greg says, well, you are trying to cast a negative light on our relationship. And Quad was like, no, I wasn't. She said the whole thing got started between us because she mentioned you. She said he wanted out of the marriage, and I responded by saying, no, I filed for divorce first. Like, I filed the paperwork. I wanted out. So we wouldn't even had a back and forth, because when I said what I said about, y'all being happy together, I wasn't even thinking about Greg. So what we talking about? So then they talk about the fight. So the situation about Greg going to the police, and Quad basically said he only did that to be vindictive and because of his ego was bruised. And you see Simone being like, on the other side of the couch. And so she was just like, Quad basically says Greg wanted to get us out the group. Like, he wanted us out the group, and that's the way that he thought he could go about doing it. So then they asked Dr. Damon about what he says, saying that it's like an unspoken rule that, like, you're not going to disrespect somebody's husband or wife and them not, like, come at you. Like, you're not going to disrespect my wife and I not check you. And so Damon ends up saying, I feel like masculinity is fine. He says sometimes aggression is needed, but there's no way that I'm going to let another man talk about my wife or disrespect her and I not say nothing. And so then Greg says, I agree, like, you should protect your mate, but when your mate is walking around disrespecting people, what's supposed to happen? And so King says she didn't disrespect you. So then Greg ends up saying, I'm telling you, I felt insulted. And Quad was like, well, that wasn't the case. She was like, I feel like anything I say, you're going to feel a certain type of way because I wasn't trying to outright disrespect you. So I don't know where you got that from. So then Greg brings up, what about you talking about the baby shower? And Quad was like, I said that so that you would realize that there's no bad blood, no beef. Now, Quad, I don't know about that. I don't know about that, ma'am. You was clowning that night. I enjoyed it, okay? But I don't know. I feel like you were saying what you wanted to say, and you wanted to poke fun at them, and that's what you did. That's what you did. You wanted to get a rise out of them, and you were successful, okay? So then they go back and forth about it. So then all of a sudden Greg is talking about, like, I didn't do anything to you. I could have took you for your money. And like, no, he tried to say I gave you everything you wanted in the divorce. And Quad was like, pretty much, girl, there wasn't nothing to get from you, Gregory. She was like, I didn't need nothing from you. And she was like, I had my own money. And Greg was like, I could have took that money. And she's like, for what? She was like, I helped you build your practice. Why would you need to take anything from me? If anything, I could take something from you. And I was just like, yeah, this is an awkward conversation. This is a very awkward conversation. And I do believe Quad. I don't think Quad wanted anything from Gregory. And I don't even think Gregory could take anything from Quad. Because when they were divorced, I think the power dynamics were slightly shifting, where Quad was probably making more money than him. But overall in their relationship, he made more money than her. So she could have got alimony from him. So then Toya chimes in and she says, yeah, like, no, because Andy ends up being like, can we get back to the question that I was asking? And so what was the question? And Toya said, yes, there is an unspoken rule that, like, you're not just going to disrespect somebody else's spouse and their husband or wife is not going to say anything. And so Cecil says, like, I think everyone believes that, you're not just going to say anything to my wife and I not say anything. But he said, but on the back end, your wife just can't be going around just saying anything and nobody say anything back to her. Like, I don't agree with that. So, and then Heavenly chimes in and she's like, honestly, Cecil, I disagree with you. Like, and so they start going back and forth. But I was actually on Cecil's side. And I got where Heavenly was coming from. Like, I get where Cecil's saying, like, no man should be disrespecting any other wives and vice versa. But also, your wife ain't just gonna be saying anything to me and I'm not gonna say something back. But there should be a level of tact where you say something back to that person and vice versa. And so when Heavenly and Cecil were getting back and forth to it, I was just like, Heavenly, for a fact, if any of them women came at Damon, it's guns a-blazing. So I just feel like, I get what you're saying, but it don't apply all the way, because you can't come out your neck and not think you gonna get disrespected back. Like, remember, you called that man a pedo. Like, he was well within his right to dog walk you after that, and he didn't. But Greg would have been well within his right to go off on Heavenly after she called him that. And that's where the lines get blurred, is because some people don't know to stay in that line of being, to respectfully disagree. So then next thing you know, Sweet Tea says there's a double standard. We can agree to disagree. And this Toya jumps in and she's like, it's not a double standard. She was like, and then Sweet Tea's like, no, it is, because not everybody operates the same way. And then Toya said, obviously, you're used to that type of conversation at your household, but we don't operate that way. I said, Toya was on Sweet Tea's neck. I don't care what nobody say, because I was like, well, she got a point. But dang, girl. The conversation continues where they rehash the whole hot mic situation just with the ladies on stage. And pretty much everybody was like, yeah, it was concerning. And Eugene tries to, I guess, give nuance by saying, well, we've all had some pretty rough conversations with our spouses. But then Heavenly is like, Eugene, you making excuses because Damon ain't never talked to me like that. I think production thought what they were showing was going to show Damon talking to Heavenly out of pocket, but that's not what I got from that. Because even when they flash back to that scene, Damon was still respectful as he was trying to take off her mic. Like, he was just like, you don't listen. He wasn't aggressive. It was just very much like, girl, I'm tired. Okay. And you could tell that he was tired because he had on his work scrubs. And I was just like, yeah, he tired of you, Heavenly. Like, you doing too much. The man asked you to be quiet and you ain't want to be quiet. Versus when I saw what happened with Greg and Sweet Tea, that gave me pause. Like, that gave me very much, like I said in that review, that either they might get physical, or two, they talk to each other all types of crazy when there's no cameras there. And it's probably borderline emotionally and verbally abusive up in that household. Okay. So, you then hear Greg apologize to Sweet Tea. Now, mind you, Andy ended up saying, well, Greg said he apologized to you. I said, no, he didn't. He said my wife is owed an apology. So I feel like this is him apologizing, because Andy said, well, we know you apologize privately. I said, I don't believe that. I don't believe that not one bit. So he says, you know what, baby, you my world, you my heart. So that's him apologizing to her. That would have not been good enough for me. It would have been like, I was wrong for the way in which I spoke to you, and there's no excuse, and I apologize. You mean the world to me. And we move on, So then Sweet Tea ends up saying, well, in regular relationships, you have spats. We're going to have spats. And Greg says we still learning each other. And I'm like, how long have y'all been married? And didn't y'all date like 2 or 3 years before that? You still learning her? So then King is like, honestly, you can learn anybody, but that behavior is not normal. So then Sweet Tea gets an attitude with King where she's like, it's our normal, and it's for us, not for you to comment, King. And I was like, girl, it's pretty telling when men will say that another man is out of pocket, because they rarely do that. So you should watch him, okay? Watch him. You gotta watch. So then Contessa tries to advocate for Sweet Tea and Greg by saying, we've all had rough conversations, so let's not act like that's not happening. But girl, we don't want to hear from you either because you and Scott be talking to each other crazy. So then Toya chimes in and she says, I think we were just concerned, and we don't know if y'all have done the work. Me and Eugene have went to counseling for the way that we speak to each other. And right now, we don't know if y'all have done the work. And she points to Mimi. So then Mimi says, no, they're in counseling. So I guess they are in counseling about the way that they speak to each other. So then Andy ends up asking Sweet Tea, do you think that you and Quad and King and Gregory can coexist? And she's like, yeah, I think we can. So then Quad ends up saying, I don't know if I want to put me and my man in a compromising position. And she said, as of right now, I don't know if I can say right now that I'm okay with us being together, which I think is real. I think Sweet Tea can say that they can coexist because they don't have history like that. King and Gregory have history, girl. They were married for almost like 8 years before you even entered the chat. So like, of course, it's going to be harder for her to be like, I don't know if I could be around that person. So next thing you know, we find out Gregory going to perform that song. When King put his hand on his head like, Lord, and Quad's like, he really going to perform this song? And when Heavenly said, why is he doing this to himself? Like, everybody was laughing at him. When I tell you Simone tickled me, because Simone was like, you see him take off his jacket. He has on Access to the Money shirt. He has on like the LL Cool J hat. And then Mimi was just gagged. Mimi was like, and so he pulled out that mic and he said, set me free. I want to be safe from the bullshit. Set me free. And Sweet Tea is just like, yeah, baby. Yeah. I said, girl, at least you go support your man, because I could never. You are not going to embarrass me like that. Andy is just sitting there tickled. Andy is tickled, okay? Andy is tickled by this. And Eugene said, let's not never do that again. Let's never do that again. So we then see Eugene in the back with the women. They taking a break because after Eugene sings, it's a break. And Eugene talks to Damon. He's like, you said a lot. He said, and Damon was like, I said a little bit. No, Eugene said, you said more than what you normally say. And he goes on to say, that there's certain words that trigger men. And then you hear Toya say, like, the word coward, because you did call that man a coward. And he was like, well, that's how I felt, and that's what I thought. And he was just like, Eugene said, I cringed because I thought y'all was going to fight. Because, you say that to some people, y'all going to fight. But then Heavenly gets into it, and she was like, but you wouldn't, but Damon was like, I would never say that to you unless I felt that way or we were in a compromising position like that. And Heavenly was like, well, Eugene, you ain't never been in that situation like that. And Toya says, I would never put my man in no situation like that either. So we gonna get up on out of here. And the reunion was actually really cute to me, where it really did tie everything up in a nice, cute little bow. I still wonder where we go from here, because I don't know how true these statements were to each other, but I am wondering, does this mean that everybody's coming back or not? Or are we adding new people? I don't know. I will say, I think it might be time to demote Jackie and Simone to like friends of, and then bring in 2 new full-time housewives and then move forward. I feel like at this point with Jackie and Simone, they could just be friends of. And we just see them in, a group capacity. But, I still like what Jackie said, like everybody in this group is special. I don't know about Sweet Tea. And maybe Mimi. We still ain't got to know Mimi. But like, for the people that we know, like Contessa, Heavenly, Quad, Jackie, Simone, and Toya, everybody makes up this group, and everybody is special to this group in some way or form. So I am thinking, if they want to keep this group, we're going to have to demote a few people. So I would demote Jackie and Simone. I would keep Toya, Quad, Heavenly, and Contessa full-time, and then keep Mimi and maybe add 2 new people. I don't know about Sweet Tea. Like, I want her to stay on this show only so she could get away from Gregory and stack her coin, but I don't know. She not right up there, okay? So they play this cute game where they try to figure out who's the shadiest. So they're reading off the shady comments that people are making, and pretty much Heavenly said all of them. She talked about Simone stiff dancing, Contessa's horrible style, Toya always moving and not doing nothing, everything, and Jackie and all of that stuff. So Heavenly was the one that won the shady game. Then at the end, Andy ends up asking everyone to kind of say nice things about each other. And so Andy's like, can you say something sweet? Heavenly, can you say something sweet about Sweet Tea? And she says, you know what? I applaud her for coming back to this show and for being here, basically throwing a dig at Phaedra for not showing up. She also says, I appreciate her going as hard for her husband because I go hard for mine. And, I respect that about her. So then Sweet Tea was like, I respect the fact that she goes hard for her husband too. We just two hard bitches, Then Sweet Tea said something nice about Quad, where she was like, I really hope that you're happy with King. And she was like, I also wish that maybe we could communicate on our IVF journey. And then the next thing, Quad said something about, she was like, maybe in due time we can get to know each other better and realize we're on the same trajectory. That would be honestly the only reason why I want Sweet Tea to stay around, is because I feel like the more she stays around these women, the more she would realize Gregory ain't it, okay? And get away from that man, okay? And find you a 40-year-old, since you still in your 30s, to have your babies with, because you like them old, okay? So Heavenly and Contessa said nice things. Contessa said that Heavenly looked beautiful. Heavenly was like, I know. And she was like, you look beautiful too. And then that's when Jackie said everyone is special. And then Mimi was like, you know what? I'm glad to be around. She was like, I love the fact that everybody can move forward. It just shows a level of maturity. So then Toya's like, you know what? The reason because Andy was like, well, you call Jackie boring, Toya. And Jackie was like, well, she is boring. But she's like, maybe Jackie's not boring. It's just that I like to have a lot of fun. So maybe Jackie can come out partying with us. And Simone said, Jackie, no, we going to bed. So then they pass around these goblets with like shots in them. And Simone does a toast, does a toast where she says something nice about everybody, where she was like, Andy, I'm grateful that we're able to argue back and forth with you every single year. She said to Jackie, I hope, there's nothing that's ever going to tear us apart. I love you down. She said, with Heavenly, keep being shady because you make me laugh. She said, with Mimi, welcome on this wild ride. She said to Toya, I can't wait to go into your new house and get spoiled with wine and Eugene's cooking. And Toya lets it be known that everybody's invited. She said with Sweet Tea, she said, I hope you can find it in your heart to realize that we all do genuinely love each other, even through the bullshit. Maybe, I guess, saying, and one day you might be a part of that, because I don't know, Simone. And then she said, she was like, she goes on, and she says to Quad, she said, I didn't know how hard you had it that year, but for that, I am truly sorry for the part that I played in it. And then she says to Contessa, welcome back, bitch. And then that's where the episode ends. So I thought it was cute. Again, I don't know what they about to do for season 12, but I'm happy Married to Medicine is over. Let's move on. Okay. So as always, remember to be bravely authentic. Definitely hop down in them comments below and like the video and subscribe. And I'm out, y'all. Deuces.